The evening was calm, but there was a buzz of excitement in the air. The grand ballroom of the Los Angeles Convention Center was alive with energy. Bright lights reflected off crystal chandeliers hanging high above the crowd. Hundreds of people dressed in their finest outfits moved around the room, chatting, laughing, and sipping on glasses of champagne. It was a charity gala, one of those events where everyone wanted to be seen. Celebrities, politicians, business leaders, and socialites had gathered under one roof to support a noble cause, raising money for veterans' families. Among the sea of faces, two figures stood out more than most. One was Chuck Norris, the man whose name had become synonymous with toughness and resilience. Known for his martial arts skills, his roles in action movies, and even his larger-than-life persona in internet memes, Chuck carried himself with quiet confidence. He wasn't one to seek attention, but his presence always commanded respect. Standing near him was Whoopi Goldberg, another legend in her own right. With her sharp wit, bold personality, and decades-long career in entertainment, she was a force to be reckoned with. Together, they represented two very different worlds, yet both were beloved by millions. As the night went on, guests mingled freely, exchanging pleasantries and posing for photos. Waiters weaved through the crowd, carrying trays of hors d'oeuvres and drinks. Laughter echoed off the walls, blending with the soft strains of live music playing in the background. Everything seemed perfect, almost picture-perfect, but no one could have predicted what would happen next. Chuck stood near the entrance, talking quietly to a few acquaintances. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes scanned the room thoughtfully. He didn't attend events like this often, preferring to stay out of the spotlight unless it was for something truly important. This particular gala, however, resonated with him deeply. The mission, to help veterans and their families, was close to his heart. Chuck had spent years advocating for service members and knew firsthand the sacrifices they made, so when he received the invitation, he accepted without hesitation. Across the room, Whoopi was making her way toward the center of the ballroom. She greeted friends and strangers alike with her signature charm, stopping occasionally to pose for pictures or sign autographs. Her gown shimmered under the light and her smile lit up the space around her. Despite her fame, she had a way of making people feel comfortable, as if she were just another guest rather than a Hollywood icon. As she approached the area where Chuck was standing, she spotted him immediately. "Chuck," she called out warmly, raising her hand in greeting. Her voice carried over the hum of conversation, drawing the attention of nearby guests. Chuck turned at the sound of his name and saw Whoopi walking toward him. She extended her hand, ready to greet him with a firm handshake, a gesture that symbolized camaraderie and mutual respect. But instead of reaching out to meet her halfway, Chuck hesitated. For a brief moment, time seemed to freeze. Everyone within earshot stopped what they were doing, their curiosity piqued by the sudden tension in the air. Chuck's expression remained calm, but there was something unreadable in his eyes. Without saying a word, he gently shook his head and lowered his gaze. It was a subtle movement, almost imperceptible, but it spoke volumes. Whoopi froze, her hand still suspended in midair. Confusion flickered across her face before she quickly masked it with a polite smile. "Oh," she said softly, withdrawing her hand. Though her tone was light, it was clear that the moment had caught her off guard. Cameras clicked furiously as reporters and photographers scrambled to capture the exchange. Whispers rippled through the crowd, growing louder with each passing second. "What just happened?" someone murmured nearby. Laura Bennett, a well-known actress, leaned closer to her companion, Daniel Carter, a producer. "Did Chuck Norris really just refuse to shake Whoopi's hand?" she whispered incredulously. Daniel shrugged, looking equally baffled. "I don't know, but this is going to be all over the news tomorrow." Others joined in, speculating about what might have caused such an unusual reaction. Some suggested it could be a personal disagreement between the two stars, while others wondered if it was related to politics or some hidden feud. Whatever the reason, it was clear that this moment would not be forgotten anytime soon. Meanwhile, Chuck remained composed, his demeanor giving nothing away. He didn't seem angry or upset. If anything, he appeared thoughtful, as though weighing his next words carefully. Whoopi too maintained her composure, though it was evident that she was processing what had just occurred. Neither of them said anything immediately, allowing the silence to stretch on longer than anyone expected. Finally, Chuck broke the quiet. His voice was steady and measured, cutting through the murmurs like a knife. "Whoopi," he began, addressing her directly. All eyes turned to him, eager to hear what he would say. "I want you to know that I hold you in the highest regard. You are an incredible talent and a trailblazer in your field. But tonight—" He paused, choosing his words with precision. "Tonight I cannot shake your hand." A collective gasp swept through the room. People exchanged glances, unsure of how to react. Was this some kind of joke? A publicity stunt? Or was there a deeper meaning behind his actions? Chuck's statement only added to the mystery. "This event," he continued, gesturing slightly, to indicate the lavish surroundings, "is meant to honor our veterans and their families. These are men and women who have given everything for us. Everything. And yet, I see so many here tonight who treat this cause as little more than a photo opportunity." His gaze swept over the crowd, meeting the eyes of several attendees. "It's not enough to wear a ribbon or write a check. Real change requires commitment and accountability." His words hung in the air, heavy with significance. Some people shifted uncomfortably in their seats while others nodded in agreement. Among the guests, reactions varied widely. Rachel Meyer, a journalist covering the event, scribbled notes furiously in her notebook, recognizing the potential impact of Chuck's speech. Kevin Foster, a political analyst seated a few tables away, frowned, already formulating arguments against what he perceived as unnecessary drama. For Whoopi, the moment was surreal. She listened intently, her usual humor replaced by a look of contemplation. While she might have been surprised or even hurt by Chuck's refusal to shake her hand, she understood the weight of his message. After all, she had been part of countless discussions about using platforms for good. Now she found herself at the center of one. As the initial shock wore off, the atmosphere in the room began to shift. Conversations resumed, albeit more subdued than before. Guests whispered among themselves, dissecting every detail of the encounter. Some praised Chuck for his courage, applauding him for speaking truth to power. Others criticized him, accusing him of being unnecessarily confrontational. Regardless of individual opinions, one thing was certain. The evening had taken an unexpected turn, and its effects would ripple far beyond the confines of the ballroom. Outside, reporters stationed near the red carpet buzzed with excitement. News of Chuck's actions spread quickly, thanks to social media updates from guests inside. Within minutes, hashtags like Xiao, Chuck Norris handshake, and Whoopi moment began trending online. Memes and jokes flooded Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, turning what had started as a private interaction into a public spectacle. Back inside, Chuck and Whoopi parted ways, each retreating to opposite sides of the room. Neither gave any further comment that night, leaving the rest of the world to speculate about what had transpired. But as the hours passed and the gala drew to a close, it became clear that this incident was far from over. In fact, it was only the beginning of a much larger conversation, one that would captivate the nation in the days and weeks to come. And so, the stage was set for what promised to be a story unlike any other. From the opulent halls of a Los Angeles charity gala to living rooms across America, the tale of Chuck Norris, Whoopi Goldberg, and a single moment of defiance would leave an indelible mark on the cultural landscape. What happened next would challenge perceptions, spark debate, and ultimately remind everyone of the power of words and actions to shape the world. The aftermath of Chuck Norris's unexpected refusal to shake Whoopi Goldberg's hand rippled far beyond the confines of the charity gala. By the next morning, the story had exploded into a national sensation. News outlets scrambled to cover every angle of the incident, dissecting Chuck's words and speculating about his motives. Social media platforms buzzed with reactions from millions of people, each eager to share their opinion on what had transpired. Rachel Meyer, a seasoned journalist known for her investigative pieces, sat at her desk in her small home office typing furiously on her laptop. She had been at the gala the night before, witnessing the moment firsthand. Now she was determined to write an article that would cut through the noise and provide clarity. Her mind raced as she recalled Chuck's calm but firm tone, the way his words seemed to resonate with some while alienating others. Rachel knew this wasn't just another celebrity spat. It was something deeper, something worth exploring. Meanwhile, Kevin Foster, a political commentator with a knack for stirring controversy, appeared on a popular morning talk show. Sitting across from the host, Emily Dawson, he leaned forward in his chair, his expression serious. "Look," he said, addressing the camera directly, "I understand that Chuck Norris is passionate about veterans' issues, but let's be honest. Was this really the right time or place to make such a bold statement? Declining to shake someone's hand at a charity event comes off as unnecessarily confrontational." Emily nodded thoughtfully, glancing at her co-host, Brian Lawson, who chimed in. "That's a fair point," Brian added. "But you have to admit Chuck's message got people talking. Isn't that part of the goal here, to raise awareness?" Kevin shook his head. "Awareness is one thing, but there's a difference between raising awareness and embarrassing someone publicly. Whoopi didn't deserve that kind of treatment." As the debate unfolded on live television, viewers weighed in with their own thoughts. Comments poured in on social media, ranging from supportive messages for Chuck to harsh criticisms of his actions. Some praised him for standing up for veterans, calling him a hero for speaking out against hypocrisy. Others accused him of using the event as a platform for personal grievances, arguing that his timing was inappropriate. Whoopi Goldberg decided to address the situation herself during her daily talk show later that afternoon. Walking onto the set, she greeted her co-hosts and the studio audience with her usual warmth, though there was a hint of seriousness in her demeanor. After a brief introduction, she took a deep breath and began to speak. "Last night," she said, leaning slightly forward in her chair, "something happened that I think we should all talk about. For those of you who don't know, Chuck Norris and I were at a charity gala, and when I went to shake his hand, he declined. At first, I'll admit it stung. It felt personal. But then I listened to what he had to say, and I realized it wasn't about me. It was about something bigger." Her voice softened as she continued. "Chuck made a point last night, a valid one. He talked about accountability, about doing more than just showing up or writing a check. And honestly, he's right. We can always do better. I can always do better." The audience erupted into applause, moved by her candor and willingness to reflect on the situation. One of her co-hosts, Laura Bennett, leaned in and asked, "Do you think Chuck's approach was effective, though? Do you agree with how he delivered his message?" Whoopi paused, considering the question carefully. "You know, I think intentions matter," she replied. "If someone like Chuck Norris says something, you listen. His heart is in the right place. He's been fighting for veterans for years. Could he have handled it differently? Maybe. But I'm not going to hold a grudge over this. Instead, I want to focus on what we can learn from it." Her response struck a chord with many viewers, earning praise for its maturity and grace. While some still defended Chuck's decision to decline the handshake, others appreciated Whoopi's ability to rise above the drama and turn the conversation toward meaningful action. Behind the scenes, however, the fallout continued to unfold. Maria Lopez, a mutual friend of both Chuck and Whoopi, found herself caught in the middle. A longtime advocate for veterans' causes, Maria had worked with both celebrities on various projects in the past. When news of the incident broke, she received countless calls and messages from friends and colleagues asking for her take on the situation. Feeling torn, Maria decided to reach out to both parties privately. She sent text messages to Chuck and Whoopi, inviting them to meet for coffee away from the public eye. To her relief, both agreed. They arranged to meet at a quiet cafe in Santa Monica, a location chosen specifically for its low profile. Maria hoped that bringing them together might help clear the air and perhaps even lead to something positive. When the day of the meeting arrived, Chuck and Whoopi walked into the cafe separately, each carrying their own thoughts and emotions. The space was cozy, with soft lighting and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. Maria greeted them warmly, guiding them to a corner table where they could talk without interruptions. At first, The conversation was awkward. Both Chuck and Whoopi hesitated, unsure of how to begin. Maria broke the ice by sharing her perspective on the situation. "I know neither of you intended for things to blow up the way they did," she said gently. "But now that they have, maybe, we can use this moment to create something meaningful, something that honors the cause you both care so deeply about." Encouraged by her words, Chuck spoke up. "Whoopi," he began, looking directly at her, "I want to apologize if my actions hurt you. That wasn't my intention. My only goal was to highlight an issue that I believe deserves more attention: the struggles our veterans face when they come home. Too often these problems are ignored or brushed aside. I wanted to remind everyone that real change requires effort, not just appearances." Whoopi nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I get that, Chuck," she said. "And I respect your passion, but you have to understand how it felt in the moment. When you refused to shake my hand, it felt like a rejection, not just of me, but of everything I stand for. I needed time to process that." Chuck listened intently, nodding slowly. "I hear you," he replied, "and I'm sorry if it came across that way. That wasn't my intent. I hope you can see that my words were meant to challenge everyone in that room, including myself, to do better." The tension between them began to ease as they opened up about their perspectives. Whoopi admitted that she hadn't fully grasped the depth of the challenges faced by veterans until Chuck's remarks forced her to reconsider her assumptions. Chuck, in turn, acknowledged that his approach might have been too blunt and expressed regret for any discomfort it caused. By the end of their conversation, both Chuck and Whoopi emerged with a newfound understanding of each other. They realized that despite their differences, they shared a common goal: to support veterans and their families in meaningful ways. Inspired by this realization, they decided to collaborate on future projects aimed at addressing the very issues Chuck had highlighted during the gala. As they left the cafe together, Chuck turned to Whoopi and smiled. "Thank you for listening," he said sincerely. "It means a lot." Whoopi returned the smile, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Just promise me one thing," she joked. "Next time, no surprises, okay?" They laughed, the sound echoing softly in the quiet street. What had started as a tense and controversial moment had transformed into an opportunity for growth and collaboration. Though the nation remained divided in its opinions about the incident, Chuck and Whoopi proved that even the most unlikely alliances could emerge from adversity. In the days that followed, news of their private meeting leaked to the press, reigniting public interest in the story. While some remained skeptical, others saw it as a sign of hope, a reminder that dialogue and empathy could bridge even the widest gaps. As the weeks passed, plans for their joint initiative began to take shape, promising to bring much-needed attention to the struggles faced by veterans. For Chuck and Whoopi, the journey was far from over, but they had taken the first step toward turning a moment of conflict into a catalyst for change. And in doing so, they reminded the world that sometimes the hardest conversations are the ones worth having. The weeks following the charity gala incident were a whirlwind of activity for both Chuck Norris and Whoopi Goldberg. While the initial shock of the moment had begun to fade, its ripple effects continued to shape public discourse. Conversations about accountability, activism, and the treatment of veterans dominated headlines, talk shows, and social media feeds. The nation remained divided, with some hailing Chuck as a hero for speaking his mind and others criticizing him for what they saw as unnecessary drama. Chuck spent much of his time reflecting on the situation. Sitting in his quiet ranch house in Texas, he often found himself replaying the events of that night in his mind. He knew his decision to decline Whoopi's handshake had sparked controversy, but he also believed it was necessary to drive home his point. Still, he couldn't ignore the criticism. Some accused him of being self-righteous or overly harsh, while others questioned whether his actions had overshadowed the very cause he sought to champion. To clear his thoughts, Chuck spent hours walking through the sprawling fields surrounding his property. The crisp morning air helped ground him, reminding him of simpler times when life wasn't dictated by public opinion or media scrutiny. As he walked, he thought about the veterans he had met over the years, their stories of sacrifice, resilience, and struggle. These memories reinforced his belief that the issue at hand was bigger than any one person, including himself. It wasn't about pointing fingers. It was about inspiring action. Meanwhile, Whoopi navigated her own emotional landscape. Back in New York City, she balanced hosting her daily talk show with processing the aftermath of the gala. On screen, she maintained her usual charm and humor, but off camera she allowed herself moments of introspection. She replayed Chuck's words in her mind, considering their weight and meaning. Though she initially felt hurt by his refusal to shake her hand, she came to see it as a wake-up call, a reminder that even someone as outspoken and involved as she was could do more. One evening, after wrapping up filming for the day, Whoopi sat in her dressing room, flipping through notes from past interviews and segments related to veterans' issues. She realized that while she had occasionally touched on the topic, she hadn't dedicated significant time or resources to addressing it comprehensively. This realization weighed heavily on her. Maybe Chuck was right, she muttered to herself, scribbling down ideas for future episodes and potential partnerships. Determined to turn the experience into something positive, she resolved to channel her energy into making a tangible difference. As word spread about Chuck and Whoopi's private meeting and their plans to collaborate, anticipation grew among fans and critics alike. Many wondered how two figures with such different personalities and approaches would work together. Would their partnership succeed, or would it collapse under the pressure of conflicting egos? Journalists eagerly awaited updates, hoping to capture exclusive details about their upcoming projects. Maria Lopez played a key role in bringing their collaboration to life. After facilitating their initial meeting, she worked tirelessly behind the scenes to help them outline their shared vision. Together, they decided to launch a campaign called Honor Beyond Words, aimed at raising awareness and funds for veterans' mental health services. The initiative would include a series of town hall discussions, fundraising events, and multimedia content designed to educate the public about the challenges faced by returning service members. Planning sessions took place over video calls and in-person meetings, with Chuck and Whoopi gradually building a rapport. At first, their interactions were polite but cautious, each carefully choosing their words to avoid misunderstandings. Over time, however, they began to relax, discovering common ground beyond their differences. They bonded over shared values, respect for hard work, admiration for those who serve, and a desire to leave a lasting impact. During one planning session, Chuck leaned back in his chair and smiled. "You know," he said, addressing Whoopi, "when this whole thing started, I never imagined we'd end up working together. But now I think it's exactly what needs to happen." Whoopi grinned, nodding in agreement. "Me neither," she admitted. "But here we are, and honestly, I think we're going to make a pretty good team." Their chemistry became evident during the campaign's launch event, held in Washington, D.C. several months later. Standing side by side on stage before an audience of supporters, lawmakers, and veterans, Chuck and Whoopi delivered a powerful message about unity and purpose. Chuck spoke first, his voice steady and earnest as he recounted stories of soldiers he had met and the sacrifices they had made. He emphasized the importance of not just talking about change, but actively participating in creating it. When it was Whoopi's turn to speak, she brought a sense of warmth and humor to the conversation. "Let me tell you something," she said, drawing laughter from the crowd. "If Chuck Norris tells you to step up, you listen, because if anyone knows how to fight for what's right, it's this guy." Her words bridged the gap between seriousness and levity, earning applause from everyone present. After the speeches, attendees participated in workshops and panel discussions, led by experts in veteran care and advocacy. Veterans themselves shared their experiences, offering first-hand accounts of the challenges they faced transitioning back to civilian life. For many in the audience, these stories were eye-opening, underscoring the urgent need for systemic change. Backstage after the event, Chuck and Whoopi exchanged a look of mutual satisfaction. "We did it," Whoopi said, clapping her hands together. "This is just the beginning." Chuck nodded, his expression thoughtful. "It's a start," he agreed. "But there's still so much work to be done." Word of the campaign quickly spread, drawing support from unexpected quarters. Celebrities, politicians, and everyday citizens joined forces to amplify the message. Social media campaigns encouraged people to share personal stories of loved ones who had served, using hashtags like Honor Beyond Words and Support Our Heroes. Donations poured in, funding programs that provided counseling, job training, and housing assistance for veterans in need. Despite the progress, challenges remained. Not everyone embraced the campaign with open arms. Critics argued that Chuck and Whoopi were merely capitalizing on a controversial moment to boost their public images. Others dismissed the effort as superficial, claiming it lacked concrete solutions. While these criticisms stung, Chuck and Whoopi refused to let them derail their mission. Instead, they doubled down, focusing on measurable outcomes rather than empty gestures. One of the most impactful components of the campaign was a documentary series produced by Maria Lopez and her team. Titled Voices of Valor, the series featured intimate interviews with veterans and their families, shedding light on the realities of post-service life. Each episode highlighted a specific issue: mental health struggles, unemployment, homelessness, and offered practical advice for viewers looking to get involved. Chuck and Whoopi appeared in several episodes, sharing their insights and encouraging others to take action. The response to the series was overwhelmingly positive. Viewers praised its authenticity and emotional depth, calling it a much-needed addition to the national conversation. Schools and community organizations incorporated episodes into their curricula and outreach programs, sparking meaningful dialogue across generations. As months turned into a year, the partnership between Chuck and Whoopi evolved into a genuine friendship. Their collaboration had taught them valuable lessons about humility, empathy, and the power of listening. They discovered that despite their contrasting styles, one stoic and disciplined, the other bold and irreverent, they complemented each other in ways neither had anticipated. Reflecting on the journey, Chuck expressed gratitude for the opportunity to work alongside someone as passionate and committed as Whoopi. "She's a force of nature," he told reporters during a joint interview. "I've learned so much from her perspective. If we can inspire even a fraction of the country to take action, then all of this will have been worth it." Whoopi echoed his sentiments, adding, "Chuck pushed me out of my comfort zone and I'm better for it. We may come from different worlds, but at the end of the day, we're fighting for the same thing: a brighter future for those who've given so much." The campaign's success marked a turning point in the national conversation about veterans' issues. Lawmakers introduced new legislation aimed at improving access to mental health care and employment opportunities for returning service members. Nonprofit organizations reported increased volunteerism and donations, citing the campaign as a catalyst for renewed interest in their missions. For Chuck and Whoopi, the experience reinforced their belief in the power of collaboration. What had begun as a contentious moment at a charity gala had blossomed into a movement that transcended individual egos and agendas. Through perseverance, openness, and a shared commitment to doing good, they proved that even the most unlikely alliances could yield extraordinary results. And so the story of Chuck Norris and Whoopi Goldberg became more than just a headline. It became a testament to the enduring strength of humanity. By choosing to rise above conflict and focus on a greater purpose, they inspired countless others to do the same. In a world often divided by differences, their partnership served as a reminder that unity and compassion could pave the way. As the Honor Beyond Words campaign gained momentum, Chuck Norris and Whoopi Goldberg found themselves at the center of a movement that was reshaping how people thought about veterans' issues. The campaign wasn't just about raising money or awareness. It was about fostering genuine connections between civilians and those who served. Through town hall meetings, workshops, and community events, Chuck and Whoopi brought attention to the struggles veterans faced, while also highlighting their resilience and contributions. One crisp autumn morning, Chuck stood backstage at a high school auditorium in Dallas, Texas, preparing for another town hall discussion. The event had been organized by local students eager to learn more about supporting veterans in their community. As he adjusted his tie and glanced at his notes, Chuck felt a mix of pride and responsibility. These young people were the future, and he knew that inspiring them could lead to lasting change. Whoopi joined him moments later, carrying a cup of coffee and wearing her signature bold earrings. "Ready for round two?" she asked with a grin, nudging him lightly. Chuck chuckled. Nodding, "Always," he replied. Despite their busy schedules, they had grown accustomed to traveling together for these events, finding comfort in each other's company. When they walked onto the stage, the auditorium erupted in applause. Hundreds of students sat eagerly in their seats, many clutching posters they had made to welcome Chuck and Whoopi. A group of veterans seated in the front row smiled warmly, grateful for the opportunity to share their stories. The energy in the room was electric, a testament to the impact of the campaign. Chuck opened the session with a heartfelt story about a close friend who had served in Vietnam. "He came back a different man," Chuck explained, his voice tinged with emotion. "The war didn't just leave scars on his body, it left scars on his soul, but you know what kept him going? People like you. People who cared enough to listen, to help, to make a difference." Whoopi followed up with her own message, speaking directly to the students. "You guys have power," she said, pointing to the crowd. "Don't ever think your voices don't matter. Whether it's volunteering at a VA hospital, writing letters to deployed troops, or simply thanking a veteran for their service, you can change someone's life. And trust me, when you do, it'll change yours too." After their speeches, the floor opened for questions. Hands shot up across the auditorium, and both Chuck and Whoopi took turns answering inquiries ranging from how to start a support group to ways of addressing PTSD. One student asked, "What's the hardest part about coming home after serving?" A veteran named James, sitting in the front row, responded candidly, "It's feeling invisible, like no one understands what you've been through. But when someone reaches out, when they show they care, it makes all the difference." Moments like these became defining features of the campaign. By creating spaces where veterans could speak openly and honestly, Chuck and Whoopi helped break down barriers and foster understanding. For many attendees, hearing firsthand accounts of struggle and triumph left a lasting impression, motivating them to take action in their own communities. While the campaign continued to grow, it also faced its share of challenges. Critics persisted in questioning the sincerity of Chuck and Whoopi's efforts, accusing them of using the cause for personal gain. Some argued that their celebrity status overshadowed the real heroes, the veterans themselves. Others dismissed the initiative as a temporary trend, predicting it would lose steam once public interest waned. Chuck and Whoopi refused to let negativity derail their mission. Instead, they leaned into transparency, making sure every dollar raised went directly to programs benefiting veterans. They invited independent auditors to review financial records and published detailed reports online, ensuring accountability. Their dedication silenced many detractors, proving that their intentions were genuine. Behind the scenes, Maria Lopez worked tirelessly to keep the campaign running smoothly. She coordinated logistics, managed partnerships, and handled media relations, often working late into the night. Though exhausted, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment knowing that her efforts were contributing to something meaningful. "This isn't just a job," she told a colleague during a rare moment of downtime. "It's a calling." As winter approached, Chuck and Whoopi embarked on a nationwide tour, visiting cities large and small to spread their message. From Chicago to Miami, Seattle to Atlanta, they met with veterans, families, and advocates, listening to their concerns and celebrating their successes. Each stop reinforced their belief that the campaign was about more than policy changes. It was about building relationships and creating a network of support. In Denver, Colorado, they attended a fundraising gala hosted by a local nonprofit dedicated to helping homeless veterans. The event featured performances by musicians, testimonials from veterans, and an auction of donated items. Chuck delivered a moving speech, urging guests to remember that even small acts of kindness could have a profound impact. A warm meal, a safe place to sleep, a friendly face. These things might seem simple, but to someone who's lost everything, they mean the world, he said, his words resonating deeply with the audience. Whoopi closed the evening with a call to action, encouraging attendees to volunteer their time and skills. Not everyone can write a big check, she admitted, but everyone has something to give. Maybe you're good at cooking or fixing cars or teaching kids. Whatever it is, use it to help those who need it most. By spring, the campaign had reached new heights. Donations exceeded expectations, funding initiatives that provided job training, mental health counseling, and housing assistance to thousands of veterans. Lawmakers began citing Honor Beyond Words as a model for effective advocacy, praising Chuck and Whoopi for their leadership. Even skeptics started to acknowledge the tangible results of their efforts, but perhaps the greatest achievement of the campaign was the sense of unity it inspired. Veterans who had once felt isolated found themselves surrounded by allies eager to lend a hand. Families struggling to cope with the aftermath of war discovered resources and support networks they hadn't known existed, and ordinary citizens realized that they, too, had the power to make a difference. For Chuck and Whoopi, the journey transformed not only the lives of others but also their own perspectives. Chuck, known for his stoic demeanor, found joy in connecting with people from all walks of life. He marveled at the courage and resilience of the veterans he met, drawing inspiration from their stories. Whoopi, ever the entertainer, embraced her role as an advocate, using her platform to amplify voices that might otherwise go unheard. Their partnership became a source of strength for both of them. On long flights between events, they swapped stories about their childhoods, careers, and dreams for the future. They laughed over shared meals, debated politics, and supported each other through moments of doubt. What had started as an unlikely alliance blossomed into a true friendship, rooted in mutual respect and admiration. One evening, after wrapping up a particularly emotional event in San Francisco, Chuck and Whoopi sat together on a park bench overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow across the water. Neither spoke for a while, content to simply enjoy the quiet. Finally, Whoopi broke the silence. "You know," she said softly, "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm glad that handshake thing happened. If it hadn't, we wouldn't be here doing this." Chuck nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Funny how life works sometimes," he replied. "Sometimes the toughest moments lead to the greatest opportunities." They sat there for a few more minutes, watching the city lights flicker to life. In that moment, they understood that their work was far from over. There would always be more veterans to support, more stories to tell, and more hearts to touch. But they also knew that together they had created something extraordinary, a movement fueled by compassion, determination, and hope. As they stood to leave, Chuck extended his hand toward Whoopi. This time she hesitated, raising an eyebrow playfully. "You sure about this?" she teased. Chuck laughed, shaking his head. "Just shake my hand, Whoopi," he said, his tone light but sincere. With a grin, she took his hand, gripping it firmly. It was a simple gesture, yet it carried the weight of everything they had accomplished and everything they still hoped to achieve. And so, the story of Chuck Norris and Whoopi Goldberg continued to unfold, reminding the world that even in the face of division and uncertainty, unity and purpose could light the way forward. The final chapter of Chuck Norris and Whoopi Goldberg's journey together began with a grand event that would serve as the culmination of their Honor Beyond Words campaign. It was held in Washington, D.C., at a historic venue filled with veterans, lawmakers, celebrities, and ordinary citizens who had been touched by the movement. The room buzzed with anticipation as people filed in, eager to celebrate the progress made over the past year. Chuck and Whoopi stood backstage, watching the crowd gather through a small opening in the curtain. Both were dressed formally. Chuck, in his signature suit, and Whoopi in a bold, colorful gown, but their expressions reflected a mix of pride and humility. They had worked tirelessly to bring this moment to life, and now it was finally here. "You ready for this?" Whoopi asked, nudging Chuck gently. He nodded, his usual calm demeanor masking the emotions swirling inside him. "As ready as I'll ever be," he replied with a faint smile. When they stepped onto the stage, the applause was thunderous. Hundreds of people rose to their feet, clapping and cheering for the unlikely duo who had inspired so many. For a moment, Chuck and Whoopi, simply stood there taking it all in. The weight of what they had achieved together felt overwhelming but deeply rewarding. Chuck was the first to speak. His voice carried across the room, steady and heartfelt. "A year ago, none of us could have imagined where this journey would take us," he began. "What started as a single moment of reflection has grown into something far greater, a movement driven by compassion, unity, and action." He went on to thank everyone who had contributed to the campaign, from donors and volunteers to veterans and their families. "This isn't about us," he emphasized. "It's about you, the people who stepped up when it mattered most. You've shown that no challenge is too big when we come together with purpose." Whoopi followed with her own remarks, her tone warm and engaging. "Let me tell you something," she said, drawing laughter from the audience. "When Chuck Norris tells you to get involved, you listen. But seriously, look around this room. Look at what we've built together. This isn't just a campaign, it's a family." She paused, scanning the faces before her. "Every veteran here tonight deserves our gratitude, not just today but every day, and every person in this room has played a part in making sure they know they're not alone. That's something to be proud of." After their speeches, the program shifted to honoring specific individuals whose efforts had made a significant impact. Veterans shared powerful stories of resilience and recovery, while advocates and volunteers were recognized for their dedication. One story, in particular, stood out. A young woman named Sarah had quit her job to start a nonprofit providing mental health support to female veterans. Her courage and determination brought tears to many eyes, including Chuck's and Whoopi's. As the evening unfolded, video montages highlighted key moments from the campaign's journey. Clips of town halls, fundraising events, and community projects played on large screens, accompanied by testimonials from participants. The documentary series Voices of Valor also received special recognition, with several veterans featured in the episodes joining Chuck and Whoopi on stage for a group photo. But the highlight of the night came when Chuck and Whoopi announced plans for the next phase of their work. They revealed that Honor Beyond Words would evolve into a permanent foundation dedicated to supporting veterans and their families. The foundation would focus on 3 core areas: mental health services, employment opportunities, and housing assistance. To ensure sustainability, they pledged to continue raising funds and recruiting partners nationwide. "This isn't the end," Whoopi declared, her voice filled with conviction. "It's just the beginning. We've laid the groundwork, but there's still so much more to do. Together, we can keep building a future where every veteran feels valued and supported." Chuck echoed her sentiment, adding, "We've proven that even the most unlikely alliances can create lasting change. Let's keep pushing forward, one step at a time." By the end of the night, the energy in the room was electric. Attendees mingled, exchanging ideas and making plans for how they could stay involved. Veterans embraced loved ones, grateful for the renewed sense of hope sparked by the campaign. Lawmakers promised to champion legislation aligned with the foundation's goals, while corporate sponsors committed to ongoing partnerships. In the weeks that followed, news of the event spread nationwide. Media outlets praised Chuck and Whoopi for their leadership, calling them role models for using fame as a force for good. Social media lit up with messages of gratitude and inspiration as people shared how the campaign had impacted their lives. Hashtags like Chuck Honor Beyond Words and Veterans Family continued trending, signaling that the movement showed no signs of slowing down. For Chuck and Whoopi, the success of the campaign reinforced their belief in the power of collaboration. Despite their differences, they had proven that shared values and a common goal could bridge any divide. Their friendship, forged in the crucible of controversy, had become a testament to the strength of human connection. Reflecting on the journey, Chuck found himself thinking back to that fateful night at the charity gala. What had seemed like a moment of conflict had ultimately led to something extraordinary. Sometimes, he mused during an interview, the hardest decisions lead to the greatest outcomes. Refusing to shake Whoopi's hand wasn't easy, but it opened the door to something neither of us could have predicted. Whoopi echoed his thoughts, adding, "Life has a funny way of teaching you lessons when you least expect them. If Chuck hadn't spoken up that night, I might not have realized how much more I could do to help veterans. Sometimes you need someone to push you out of your comfort zone, and I'm glad Chuck did." Their partnership extended beyond the WE campaign, as they continued to appear together at events and advocate for causes close to their hearts. Whether addressing Congress, hosting fundraisers, or visiting VA hospitals, they remained steadfast in their commitment to serving those who had served their country. Over time, Chuck returned to his quiet life in Texas, finding solace in the simplicity of ranch living. But he stayed actively involved with the foundation, offering guidance and support whenever needed. Whoopi, meanwhile, balanced her busy career with her advocacy work, using her platform to amplify the voices of veterans and their families. Though their paths often diverged, Chuck and Whoopi stayed in touch, regularly checking in with each other and reminiscing about their shared experiences. Their bond, forged through adversity and strengthened by purpose, became a source of inspiration for millions. Years later, as the foundation celebrated its 10th anniversary, Chuck and Whoopi reunited on stage once again. Now older and wiser, they looked out at the sea of faces gathered to honor their achievements. Veterans, families, volunteers, and supporters filled the room, united by a shared mission. "We set out to make a difference," Chuck said, his voice trembling slightly with emotion. "And thanks to all of you, we did. This foundation isn't ours, it belongs to everyone who believes in a better future for our veterans." Whoopi added, "Never underestimate the power of coming together. When we stand side by side, there's nothing we can't accomplish." As the crowd erupted in applause, Chuck turned to Whoopi and smiled. Extending his hand, he said softly, "Thank you. For everything." Without hesitation, she took it, gripping it firmly as cameras flashed around them. In that moment, the world saw not just two celebrities but two individuals who had chosen to rise above division and dedicate themselves to a cause greater than themselves. Their journey reminded everyone that true strength lies not in standing apart, but in standing together, for justice, for compassion, and for those who deserve nothing less than our unwavering support. And so, the legacy of Chuck Norris and Whoopi Goldberg endured, a shining example of what can happen when courage meets empathy and when action replaces apathy. Through their efforts, they left an indelible mark on the nation, proving that even in the face of challenges, hope and humanity will always prevail.